Rain hammered the shutters when Nathaniel Ashford slammed his palm against the wall, caging Eleanor Hart in the upstairs hall at midnight. His breath shook. His eyes burned. "Say you never loved me, Eleanor. Say it now, and you'll ride north by sunrise." But she could not speak because in the locked room below, she had just uncovered the lie that could bury them both. Before we ride into this story, folks, hit that subscribe button and stay with me to the very last word. And drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I'd love to see how far this tale has traveled. Thunder cracked somewhere over the Virginia tidewater, and Nathaniel Ashford drove his palm into the wall an inch from Eleanor Hart's ear. "Say it," he rasped. "Say you never loved me, and you'll be on a northbound coach by sunrise." Eleanor did not flinch. She had been raised by a man who surveyed rough country. She knew better than to run from a storm. "You don't want me to say it, sir." "I told you what I wanted, ma'am." "You told me a lie, Mr. Ashford." His jaw set. The candle down the hall sputtered and shook. "Eleanor, I will say what I know, not what you wish." "Then you are a fool." "I'd rather be a fool with the truth," she said, steady as a mason's line, "than the beloved of a man who needs me silent." Something behind the fury broke in him. He dropped his forehead to the wall above her head. She felt the tremor run the length of his body. "Woman," he whispered, "you will be the ruin of me." "No, Mr. Ashford. I will be the only honest thing that ever walked into your house." That was the midnight. That was the storm. But every storm has a first cloud, and theirs had rolled in 5 weeks earlier on a hot, still afternoon in Baltimore, when a boy named Tom came pounding up the back stairs of Mr. Folwell's print shop with news of a gentleman waiting below. 5 weeks earlier, the summer heat over Baltimore had been the kind that pressed a body flat against the boards. Eleanor Hart had been working above Mr. Folwell's printing shop on Pratt Street, where the ink fumes crept up through the floor and tangled with the smell of old river water off the harbor. She did not answer to Eleanor Hart in that city. She answered to Miss Blake. It was a name she had lifted from a playbill because it sounded plain, and plain was what a ruined woman had to be if she meant to keep eating. The knock came at 2:15. "Miss Blake, ma'am." Tom's voice cracked the way a 15-year-old voice cracks. "There's a gentleman downstairs." "What does he want, Tom?" "Won't say. But he's the sort that travels with 4 horses, ma'am, if you reckon my meaning." Eleanor lifted her head from the ledger she'd been restoring. 4-horse gentlemen had been calling on her all summer, and they did not, in her experience, improve a woman's week. "Tell him I take visitors by appointment." "He said you'd say that, ma'am." "Did he?" "Yes'm. He said he had already been to 2 other restorers in this town, and neither could do the work. He said, pardon my manners, ma'am, he said he was told you were the only woman in Baltimore who could read a burned ledger like a preacher reads scripture." "Somebody in this town talks too much." "Somebody in this town's telling the truth, ma'am." Eleanor almost smiled. She did not. "Show him into the small room, Tom, and stay within earshot of that door until I ring. You hear me?" "Yes'm." "And Tom." "Ma'am." "If he raises his voice to me, you come in with the kettle poker. Understood?" "Understood, ma'am." She set down her brush, wiped the varnish off her fingers on a strip of muslin, and caught her own reflection in the small glass by the window. The dress was 2 summers behind the fashion. The cuffs had been turned twice. Her hair was plaited and pinned with 2 horn combs she had inherited from her mother. Her mother had owned finer things once. So had her father. So had she. That was once. 2 minutes later, she came down the narrow back stair into the small room behind the print shop. The gentleman was already standing, not sitting, because he was the sort of man who measured a room before he lived in it. He was tall enough that the low beam made him tip his chin down to clear it. "Miss Blake." "Sir." "My name is Nathaniel Ashford. I have come up from the tidewater south of Richmond." "I know the tidewater country." "Do you, ma'am?" "I know it the way a surveyor's daughter knows it, Mr. Ashford. From the pages, not the porches." He took the correction without a blink. "Then I have come to the right person." "You haven't come to any person yet, sir. You've come to a door. Whether it is the right door depends on the next 10 minutes. The ghost of a smile touched the corner of his mouth and died there. Plain then. Plain always. I need work done, Miss Blake. Delicate work. Go on. There was a fire in April, in the east wing of my family's home. Most of the damage was contained, but a locked room, a room that had not been opened in some years, took heat and smoke before the men reached it. What was in that room, Mr. Ashford? He paused. She watched him weigh how much truth he could afford to hand a stranger across a print shop table. Family records, he said at last. Inheritance ledgers, land papers from my late grandfather, a bound register of births and deaths in the Ashford line going back to before the Revolution, and a portrait, my grandmother, painted the year before my father was born. And you want these things saved? I want them saved, yes, ma'am. I want more than that. What more? I want the truth about what cannot be saved. I want to know what was there as near as a skilled hand can tell. And I want to know whether anything in those records has been— He stopped. Has been what, Mr. Ashford? He held her eyes. Has been altered. Eleanor drew a slow breath. Men like Nathaniel Ashford did not walk into print shops and ask strangers if their family records had been altered. Men like Nathaniel Ashford sent a lawyer, a bribe, and a boy with a broom. They did not come themselves in traveled coats at 2 p.m, asking the truth out loud. Mr. Ashford, she said, you are the first gentleman in 7 years who has used that word in this room. Which word, ma'am? Truth. Is that uncommon in your profession, Miss Blake? In my profession, sir, men ask me for discretion. They ask me to preserve the family name. They ask me to put the wax back on the seal. No man has ever asked me what the paper actually said. I am asking. I can see that. Will you come? She set both palms flat on the table and held them there a long moment. She felt the grain of the wood. She made herself feel it because she wanted the feeling to remind her that this was a real table, a real door, a real decision. Sir, I do not go south. May I ask why, ma'am? Because the south is where my father died, Mr. Ashford, and the south is where the men who destroyed his name still drink their brandy on their porches. I have not set foot below the Potomac in 5 years. Your father. Samuel Hart. I expect you've heard of him. She watched his face. She was looking very carefully for the flicker that men of his class gave when they heard her father's name. There were 2 common flickers. The first was contempt. The second was pity. Both she had learned were insults. What she got from Nathaniel Ashford was neither. What she got was recognition. I knew your father, he said. Her hands went cold on the wood. Sir, not well, ma'am. I was too young when he came through the tidewater surveying my grandfather's lines. But I remember him. I remember him standing in our hall with a muddy coat on and a roll of paper under his arm. And I remember him telling my grandfather that the survey the family had been keeping for 30 years was wrong. Eleanor did not speak. She could not. For 5 years, she had listened to well-dressed men say her father's name in the tone a man used for a dog that had bitten a child. She had forgotten, truly forgotten, that he had once been a man other men stood up for. He was not wrong, Nathaniel said quietly. My grandfather admitted as much the winter before he died. Mr. Ashford. Ma'am, why have you come to me? Because I have a locked room full of burned paper and a painting that was repainted once, and I do not know who in this country I can trust to tell me what I'm actually looking at, and because when I asked your name came up. Whose mouth did it come out of? A printer in Richmond, a clerk in Alexandria, a widow in Fredericksburg whose late husband commissioned you to restore a letter and told her on his deathbed that you were the most honest pair of hands he had ever hired. The widow Perkins. The widow Perkins. I liked her husband. He liked you. She did not answer. She was aware very suddenly of the reign of her own heartbeat. Mr. Ashford? Ma'am. How much? $200 for 6 weeks plus room board and the carriage both ways. If the work runs long, you name the rate. Eleanor's fingers went still on the wood. $200 would clear her father's remaining debts. $200 would lift her name out of the mud his creditors had dragged it through. $200 would buy her a room of her own that did not smell of printer's ink. It would, in plain words, give her back her life. Mr. Ashford, you are either a very generous man or a very frightened one. I am the second, ma'am. Why? Because the painting was repainted by a hand I do not know, and the ledger was stitched back together by a hand I do not know. And the only two men who would have known the truth are dead, my grandfather and my father. And you are now the Ashford. I am now the Ashford. And you do not know what you inherited. I do not know what I inherited, Miss Blake, and I need to know before any other man with a claim finds it out first. Silence fell between them. Out beyond the wall, the harbor clattered with its afternoon noise, a cooper hammering a drayman shouting at his horse, a gull screaming at nothing. Eleanor thought of her father. She thought of the last letter he had ever written her, the one in which he had said, "Keep your eyes on the paper, girl. The paper does not lie even when men do." She lifted her chin. "Mr. Ashford." "Ma'am." "I will come on 3 conditions." "Name them." "First, I do not sign your name as Hart. I will come as Miss Blake. Your household will not know who I am until I choose to be known." "Agreed." "Second, if I find what you fear I will find, you will not ask me to soften it. You will not ask me to unsee it. You will not ask me to rebind the ledger in a way that lies." A long pause. "Agreed." "Third, when the work is done, and if I have done it honest, you will say so in public. You will not send me north with a polite note and a closed mouth. Too many men have closed their mouths about my father. I will not be one more woman closed out of her own truth." He looked at her for a long, slow moment. "Miss Hart." "Do not call me that yet, sir, not in this town." "Miss Blake, then. If you do this work honest, I will say your true name out loud in the county seat and in the church and in the courthouse if need be. I will not send you north with a closed mouth. That is my word." "A word, Mr. Ashford, is only as good as the man." "Then measure the man, ma'am. You will have 6 weeks to do it." She almost smiled. This time she did. "Tom," she called through the door. "Yes, ma'am." "Tell Mr. Falwell I will be leaving the room above his shop at the end of the week. I will send for my things when I am settled." "Yes, ma'am. Ma'am." "Tom." "Where you headed, ma'am?" Eleanor looked across the table at Nathaniel Ashford. Nathaniel Ashford looked back. "South, Tom." "South, ma'am." "South." 4 days later, the Ashford carriage took her down the Chesapeake Road at a pace no public coach could match. She watched the farms give way to tobacco country, and the tobacco country give way to pine, and the pine give way at last to the wide, slow brown rivers of the tidewater. She kept a travel bag on her lap and a smaller oilcloth satchel between her feet. The satchel held her tools, her brushes, her blades, her loops, her tin of beeswax, her bottle of sizing her sheets of copy paper, and one item that was not strictly a tool. It was her father's last field notebook. She carried it everywhere. She did not know yet that before this summer ended, she would need every page of it. Nathaniel did not ride in the carriage with her. He rode alongside it on a dark bay gelding that did not like crowds, and he spoke to her only when the road allowed it, and only about the weather, the horses, and the miles ahead. He did not ask her questions. She was grateful for that. A man who did not waste a stranger's words was a man who knew what words cost. They came within sight of Ashford House on the 4th evening. Nathaniel drew up alongside the carriage window, swung down and opened the door himself. He did not offer his hand. He had watched her for 4 days and had understood, it seemed, that she did not take hands she had not asked for. "Welcome to Ashford House, Miss Blake." "Thank you, Mr. Ashford." "There is one thing I have not told you." "I suspected there would be." "My grandmother. The woman in the portrait. The woman in the portrait. She is alive." Eleanor stopped with one foot on the carriage step. "Sir?" "She is 79 years old. She has not spoken above a whisper since my father's funeral. She lives in the East Wing. She was in the East Wing on the night of the fire." "Mr. Ashford?" "Yes." "Was she in the locked room when it burned?" A muscle moved in his jaw. She had the only key, Miss Blake. Eleanor let the words land the way a mason lets a brick land carefully with a sense of the wall she was about to help build. And she says nothing. She says nothing. Not to the neighbors, not to the minister, not to me, not to her own reflection. And the men in town. The men in town say she is simple now. The men in town say the fire took her wits. The men in town say a good son does not press an old woman who has already outlived 2 husbands and a child. Do you believe them, Mr. Ashford? He looked at her a long moment. No, ma'am, I do not. Why not? Because 3 nights before the fire, I heard her speak clear as a courthouse bell. I heard her through the door of her own room, and I heard her say a name. Whose name? A name that is not in our family register, Miss Blake. A name I have never heard in this house in 32 years of living in it. Eleanor's hand tightened on the carriage door. Say the name Mr. Ashford. Josiah. Josiah who? Josiah whoever he is. That is the question I have brought you 80 miles of road to answer. She stood for a long second, with the evening tidewater light on her face, and the smell of salt marsh and horse sweat and wood smoke in her throat, and she made herself feel every inch of the ground under her boot, the way she had made herself feel the grain of the wood on Mr. Fulwell's table. Then, for the first time in 5 years, Eleanor Hart stepped onto Virginia soil. Then, sir, she said, we had better begin with her. The housekeeper who met Eleanor at the door was a thin, gray-eyed woman of perhaps 50, with hands that had done more real work than any mistresses ever would. Miss Blake. Ma'am, I am Mrs. Doggett. I keep this house for Mr. Ashford. You will take your meals in the small parlor unless the family sends for you. You will not enter the east wing without Mr. Ashford present. You will not speak to Mrs. Ashford, the elder Mrs. Ashford, unless she speaks first. Do I make myself plain, miss? Plain as a fence post, Mrs. Doggett? Good. We have had restorers in this house before, miss. 2 of them. They did not last the week. What happened to them, ma'am? Mrs. Doggett's mouth did a thing that was not a smile. One left of his own accord. The other was asked to leave. By whom? By Mrs. Ashford the elder, who, as you may have been told, does not speak. She asked him to leave without speaking. She threw an inkwell at his head, miss. The meaning was understood. Eleanor did not smile, because it did not seem to be that kind of house. But she filed the inkwell away, and she followed Mrs. Doggett down a long corridor whose floorboards creaked like a ship in bad weather. Nathaniel was waiting for her at the door of the workroom. Miss Blake. Mr. Ashford. This was my mother's music room. It has the best light in the house and the thickest walls. No one will disturb you here without going through me. And through Mrs. Doggett, I imagine. And through Mrs. Doggett, yes, ma'am. Then I am in good hands. You are in watched hands, miss. That is not the same thing. I will take it, sir, until it is. He held the door open. She stepped through. The long oak table in the middle of the room had been cleared and scrubbed. Along its length lay the freight of the burned east wing. 24 ledgers of varying thickness, a half-dozen rolled deeds tied in ribbon, a cedar box of letters, a bundle of court writs, and at the far end, covered in a square of clean linen, the shape of a large framed portrait lying face up. Eleanor walked the length of the table without speaking. She touched nothing. She only looked. Mr. Ashford. Ma'am? Who cleared this room for me? Mrs. Doggett, and a hired man named Caleb Reed. Not family. Not family, miss. I trust Caleb Reed further than I trust my own cousins. Good. See that no family enters this room without me in it. Miss Blake. Sir. You have not been in this house 1 hour. Mr. Ashford. I have been in this work for 7 years. The first thing I lose in every house is paper. Papers walk, sir. They walk in the pockets of people who tell themselves they are only tidying. He considered her a long moment. Agreed. Thank you. Miss Blake. Sir. Will you look at the portrait now? Not yet. Why not? Because once I look at it, Mr. Ashford, I will see what you have brought me here to see, and I would rather see it in morning light with a slept head than in evening light with a road in my bones. As you wish. Tomorrow, at first light. Tomorrow, At first light, he left. She did not sleep. She sat at the oak table in her traveling dress with her father's field notebook open on her knee, and she read his handwriting until the tallow candle guttered. And she thought of how many houses in this country had rooms like this one, rooms full of paper that had been quietly changed by someone who had counted on nobody noticing. At first light, Nathaniel was back at the door with Caleb Reed at his shoulder. Caleb was perhaps 30 broad across the chest, brown from outdoor work, with a face that did not waste a muscle. He touched his hat to her and said, "Miss Blake, ma'am," in a voice that meant it. "Mr. Reed? Just Caleb, ma'am, if it suits." "It suits." Nathaniel drew back the linen from the portrait. Eleanor took one step forward. She took one step back. She walked around the table twice without a word. She took a brass loop from her satchel, and she held it close to the canvas, moving it slow inch by inch, the way a doctor listens to a chest. 10 minutes passed. 15. "Caleb, ma'am? Bring me that lamp. Closer. Now hold it still." She leaned in. She breathed on the canvas. She pulled back and tilted her head. "Mr. Ashford?" "Miss Blake, this painting has been worked on twice." "Twice?" "The first hand painted your grandmother a gentleman in a dark coat standing behind her chair and something in her lap. The second hand, a lesser hand, sir, a competent hand, but a lesser one painted over thee. Something in her lap lengthened the sleeve of her dress and altered the shadow on the gentleman's left shoulder where a second figure used to stand." Silence. "A second figure. A small one, sir? About so high?" She held her hand at her own elbow. "A child." Caleb Reed did not move. Nathaniel did not move. Eleanor did not move. "Miss Blake." "Sir." "You are certain?" "I am certain, Mr. Ashford. I have not cleaned a thread of this canvas. I am only reading what the paint itself is telling me. There is a child in this portrait, sir, and somebody not long after this canvas was framed paid a man to paint over him." Nathaniel turned his face away. Caleb Reed's jaw went tight. "How long ago, miss?" "The overpaint, Caleb, 25 years, 30 at the outside, not recent." "Before Mr. Ashford here was born." "Before Mr. Ashford here was born." Nathaniel said very quietly, "Josiah." "Sir." "The name I told you, the name she said through the door. Mr. Ashford, I have not given you a name. I have given you a shape. I do not yet know whose child this was or why he was painted over. But I will tell you this. Children are not painted out of family portraits by accident. Sleeves are extended. Hems are adjusted. Clouds are added. Children are removed on purpose, sir. Always on purpose." She did not have time to finish the sentence, because at that moment, the hooves came up the front drive. Caleb Reed was at the window before Nathaniel. He said one word. "Boone!" Nathaniel's face closed like a door. "Miss Blake, cover that portrait. Now." She had the linen back over it before Caleb finished crossing the room. She had her loop back in her satchel. She had the satchel under the table. She had her hands folded at her waist and her eyes lowered by the time the front bell rang. "Caleb, sir, you stay in this room with her. You do not leave her side until I send for her. If he asks to see the work, you say the restorer is not to be disturbed. If he asks her name, you say Blake. If he asks where she comes from, you say Baltimore. If he asks anything else, you say you are a hired hand, and you do not know." "Yes, sir." Nathaniel looked at Eleanor. "Miss Blake." "Sir." "Whatever he says to me at that door, you do not come out. You do not make a sound. You understand me?" "I understand you, Mr. Ashford." He was gone. Eleanor did not breathe for a count of 6. Then she looked at Caleb Reed. "Who is Boone, Mr. Reed?" "Just Caleb, ma'am." "Caleb." "Silas Boone, ma'am, land broker, creditor. Sits on the county court when the judge is ill, which is oftener than it ought to be. Held a note on Mr. Ashford's uncle. Holds notes, I reckon, on half this county. Does he hold a note on this house?" Caleb hesitated. "Caleb, ma'am, I hired on here 4 years ago. I have seen that man walk in this door 11 times. 10 of those times Mr. Ashford has not been glad to see him, The 11th time was the morning after the fire. The morning after the fire. Yes, ma'am. He was in this house before the ashes were cold. He asked to see the damage. He asked to see the east wing. He asked particular about the locked room. Did he see it? No, ma'am. Mr. Ashford would not allow it. Why did he want to see it, Caleb? Ma'am, if I knew that I would have told Mr. Ashford. I don't. But I will tell you what I do know. Tell me. The night of the fire, a man was seen on the east lawn. Not one of ours. A man on a horse watching the house burn. Caleb Doggett. That's Mrs. Doggett's boy. He works the stables. Caleb Doggett saw him from the hayloft. Said the man sat there till the second floor went, then turned his horse and rode. Did Caleb Doggett tell Mr. Ashford? He told his mother. His mother told me. I told Mr. Ashford. Mr. Ashford rode out next morning along the river road and came back without a word. But the road, ma'am, goes to one place. Where, Caleb? Silas Boone's place, ma'am. Eleanor felt the cold come up the back of her neck, the way cold comes up off a river at dusk. Below them in the front hall, a door opened. A man's voice carried hearty country pleasant, the voice of a man who made his living being liked. Nathaniel, my boy, forgive the hour. I was riding the lower road and I thought, well, hang it. I thought I have not laid eyes on you since the Lord's Day, and a man in your position ought not to be left alone too many mornings in a row. Nathaniel's voice came back cool and short. Mr. Boone? Now, Nathaniel. Now. Silas. You used to call me Silas when your father was alive. My father is not alive, Mr. Boone. A pause. A laugh that did not reach the ceiling. No, he is not. God rest him. State your business, sir. Business, Nathaniel. Can a man not call on a neighbor without business? A man can. You do not. Another laugh, thinner this time. I heard in town that you have brought a restorer up from Baltimore. Upstairs, Eleanor's breath stopped. I have. A young lady, they say. A professional woman, Mr. Boone. Of course. A professional woman. And you have set her to work on the east wing, on what the fire left. Ah, on what the fire left. Mr. Boone. Nathaniel. You are standing in my front hall at 8 o'clock of a Tuesday morning, sir, asking me about a woman I have hired in my own employ. Say plain what you have come to say. The silence lasted a beat too long. Nathaniel. Some things in that east wing were not your grandfather's to leave to you. Is that so? That is so, son. That is so. And if your young professional woman from Baltimore happens to find in the course of her labors any paper bearing the name of a certain creditor, any paper at all, I would take it most neighborly if that paper came first to me, before any court, before any clerk, before any curious cousin. You understand. I understand you, Mr. Boone. Do you, Nathaniel? I understand you perfect, sir. Then we have an accord. We have no accord, Mr. Boone. I have your meaning. That is all we have. Good morning. The front door did not slam. It closed slow and hard, the way a door closes when a man is holding himself from slamming it. Upstairs in the music room, Caleb Reed looked at Eleanor Hart. Ma'am? Caleb. That man knew you were in this house before he rode in. That man knew your trade. That man knew your town. Somebody told him. Somebody in this house. Somebody, ma'am. I do not yet say in this house. Eleanor turned back to the table. She pulled the linen off the portrait. She pulled her loop back out. She set her jaw. Then we will work faster, Mr. Reed. Caleb, ma'am. Caleb. We will work faster. They worked faster. Over the next 8 days, Eleanor did not leave the music room before dark, and most nights she did not leave it before midnight. Mrs. Doggett brought her meals on a tray. Caleb Reed did not leave the corridor outside her door from sunup to supper. Nathaniel came in twice a day, morning and evening, and stood at her shoulder and asked each time the same 2 questions. What have you found today, Miss Blake? What do you need from me tomorrow, Miss Blake? She gave him each time a plain answer and a plain list. He wrote nothing down. He forgot nothing. On the 3rd morning she opened the inheritance ledger, a thick calf-bound book whose spine had cracked in the fire and she did not speak for 2 full hours. Nathaniel came in at 11. She lifted her eyes. "Mr. Ashford, sit down, sir." "Miss Blake, sit down." He sat. "This ledger, sir, records every birth, death, and land transfer in the Ashford line from 1748 to the year of your father's death. It is written through 1791 in one hand, an old hand, a schoolmaster's hand. My great-grandfather's clerk. Likely, sir. From 1791 forward a second hand, also competent, also consistent, through 1821. My father's clerk. Likely, sir. But between those two hands, between 1791 and roughly 1794, there is a third hand, for 3 entries only. 3 entries, Mr. Ashford, and then the second hand resumes as though the third hand had never been. What do the 3 entries say? They say, sir, that in September of 1792, a child named Josiah Ashford was born in this house, that in October of 1793, that child was baptized at Christ Church in this county, and that in June of 1794, that child died of a summer fever and was buried in the family plot. Nathaniel stared at her. Born, baptized, died. Born, baptized, died. 3 entries, 1 hand. No other mention of him anywhere else in this book. No mention of him in the land transfers. No mention of him in the death roll of the family plot that I have in front of me. No gravestone record at all. A child who was born and baptized in a county of this size, Miss Blake leaves a trail, in the church register, in the county death roll. He does, sir, he does, which is why I am going to ask you for the church register. You will have it tonight. And the county death roll. You will have it tomorrow. Mr. Ashford. Miss Blake. The 3 entries for Josiah Ashford are written in a hand I have seen before. Where? In the overpainting of your grandmother's portrait, sir. The lesser hand. The second painter. Whoever altered that canvas also wrote those 3 entries into this book. They are the same person. Nathaniel did not move for a long moment. Miss Blake. Sir, you are telling me that someone invented a child. I am telling you, Mr. Ashford, that someone put a child into this family's book who may never have been in this family's cradle. And sir, this is the part, you will not like someone put a dead child into this family's book to cover for a living child who was not written anywhere at all. A living child. A living child whose existence was painted out of one record and painted into another as a corpse. Because a corpse, Mr. Ashford, does not inherit land. Caleb Reed said, God in heaven. Nathaniel said nothing. Eleanor closed the ledger. She set her hand flat on top of it. Mr. Ashford. Ma'am. I need to see your grandmother. Miss Blake. She does not speak. She spoke the name. You told me so yourself. She spoke the name 3 nights before the fire through a closed door to no one in this house. She spoke the name, sir, because she wanted somebody to hear it. A person does not whisper a name through a door unless she is hoping somewhere in her heart that the right ear is on the other side. You think the right ear has come. I think, sir, that I am the first person to walk into this house in 30 years who is not afraid of what she will say. He was quiet a long time. Tonight, Miss Blake. Tonight, Mr. Ashford. After supper. I will take you to her myself. Thank you, sir. Miss Blake. Sir. If she speaks to you and not to me, you will tell me every word. You will not soften it, you will not spare me. Mr. Ashford, I told you in Baltimore I would not soften anything in this house. I meant it then. I mean it now. Even if what she says is that the Ashford name is not mine to carry. Eleanor looked at him a long, steady moment. Especially then, sir. That night after the supper plates were cleared, and the house had gone to that particular tidewater quiet that settles on a big old place. When the wind drops off the river, Nathaniel Ashford came to the music room door with a candle in his hand, and not a word in his mouth. Eleanor rose. She took up her satchel. She followed him down the corridor past Mrs. Doggett's closed parlor, past the portrait-lined stair she had not yet been allowed to climb, and into the east wing, where the bitter smell of old smoke still hung in the corners, and the plaster bore here and there the long gray tongue marks of heat. At the last door on the east corridor, Nathaniel stopped. He turned to her. He lowered his voice. "Miss Blake, before I knock." "Sir, there is one more thing I have not told you." "Mr. Ashford, I am beginning to understand that sentence is how this house breathes." He almost smiled. Almost. "My grandmother, Miss Blake, Margaret Ashford. On the night of the fire, she was found on the east lawn, barefoot, in her nightdress, with soot to her elbows, and a locked tin box clutched against her chest." "A tin box?" "A tin box, Miss Blake, not burned, not scorched, carried out of that locked room by her own hands before the smoke took it." "Where is the box now, Mr. Ashford?" "It is in the room on the other side of this door, ma'am." "And has it been opened?" "It has not, Miss Blake. It has not been opened because she will not give up the key. She wears it around her neck under her nightdress on a length of black ribbon, and she sleeps with one hand closed around it." Eleanor set her satchel down very slowly against the wall. "Mr. Ashford." "Miss Blake, knock on the door." He knocked. From the other side, after a long, long pause, came the voice of an old woman who had not been heard in clear words under that roof for nearly 3 years. "Come in, Nathaniel, and bring the Hart girl with you." The door opened on its own hinges. Margaret Ashford sat upright in a carved chair by the cold hearth, her white hair braided down one shoulder, a black ribbon at her throat, and a tin box on her lap. She was 79 years old, and she looked in that moment like a woman who had been waiting for exactly one person for exactly 30 years. "Shut the door behind you, Nathaniel." "Grandmother." "Shut it, boy." He shut it. "Miss Hart, come closer. My eyes are not what they were." Eleanor stepped into the candlelight. Margaret Ashford looked at her the way a woman looks at a face she has studied in dreams. "You have your father's jaw." "Ma'am?" "Samuel Hart's jaw. God rest him. I stood 3 feet from that jaw girl in the winter of 1791, in the front hall of this very house. He came up from the lower road with a muddy coat on and a roll of paper under his arm. Do you know what he said to me? No, ma'am. He said, 'Mrs. Ashford, I have come to tell your husband that the survey he has been keeping for 40 years is not the survey that is on file in the county.' And do you know what I said to him, girl?" "No, ma'am." "I said, 'Mr. Hart, I know.'" Nathaniel's head came up. "Grandmother." "Sit down, boy, both of you. I have been quiet a long time. I will not be quiet tonight, and I will not say any of this twice." They sat. Margaret's hand went to the black ribbon at her throat. She drew up a small iron key. She fitted it into the tin box on her lap. She turned it. The lid rose on its hinge with a small, dry sound like an old woman clearing her throat. "Miss Hart, look into this box. Tell me what you see." Eleanor leaned forward. Inside lay a thin packet of folded papers tied in faded blue ribbon, a miniature portrait on ivory, no bigger than a man's palm, and a square of linen folded around something hard. "Papers, ma'am." "A miniature, and something wrapped in cloth." "Unwrap the cloth." Eleanor's fingers were steady. She had handled older things in worse light. She unfolded the linen. Inside was a small silver teething ring, tarnished almost black, engraved with 3 letters. J.T.A. "Josiah Thomas Ashford," Margaret said. "My son." Nathaniel did not speak. He could not. "My son Nathaniel, not your father's older brother. Your father's older brother in the book downstairs died of a summer fever in 1794. That is what the book says. That is not what happened." "Grandmother." "Quiet, boy. The child did not die. The child was taken from this house on a wagon at 4 months old and given to a Methodist family in the Piedmont who had lost a son of their own. He was raised Nathaniel under another name by decent people who never knew whose blood he carried. And a small stone was set in the family plot of this house with no bones under it. Your grandfather paid a stone cutter in Richmond $40 to cut that stone. I watched him count the coin into the man's hand. Why? Why what, boy? Why was he taken? Margaret's hand closed on the teething ring. Because Nathaniel, the land this house stands on, came to your grandfather through my first marriage, not through his. My first husband was a Thomas. Thomas land, Thomas deeds, Thomas name on every survey in this county. When my first husband died, the land passed to me for my lifetime, and was to pass after me to the eldest male child of my body. That child, Nathaniel, was Josiah. Not your father, Josiah. Eleanor's hand went to her mouth. Ma'am? Yes, girl. You see it now. Your second husband. My second husband child could not inherit one blade of grass on this place except through a son of his own body. So my second husband, with the help of a county clerk and a lawyer in Richmond, and a judge who owed him money, arranged for my first son to disappear from the record. A summer fever was written in. A grave was dug. A stone was cut. A second son, your father Nathaniel, became the eldest living male of my body, and the land which had been Thomas land for 60 years became Ashford land in a single stroke of a clerk's pen. Nathaniel said in a voice that did not sound like his own, Grandmother, did you agree to this? Silence. Grandmother. I did not agree, Nathaniel. I was told. There is a difference. A woman in this country in 1794 was told a great many things. She did not sign them. She did not need to sign them. She only needed to hold her tongue, and the world would go on believing what the men had already written. And you held your tongue. I held my tongue, boy, for 30 years. I held it for my living son, your father, who did not know. I held it for you, who did not know. I held it because the alternative was to strip the roof off my own children's heads and put it on the head of a child the state would call a bastard. I held it because I was a coward, Nathaniel. Say it plain. I was a coward, and cowards raise cowards, and that is how a lie grows roots in a house. Grandmother. Hush, boy. There is more. More. The packet of papers, Miss Hart. Untie the ribbon. Eleanor untied the ribbon. The papers fell open on her lap in 3 creased sheets. The top sheet was a survey draft. The second was a sworn affidavit. The third was a letter. She looked at the signature on the affidavit. Her fingers went cold. Ma'am? Say it, girl. My father's signature is on this affidavit, ma'am. My father signed this in the winter of 1791 in this house before a witness. It says he examined the Thomas survey of this land against the Ashford survey now in use. It says the Ashford survey of record has been altered. It says the altered boundaries quietly transferred 320 acres of the Thomas tract into an adjoining parcel held by... She stopped. Her throat closed. Say the name, Miss Hart, held by Silas Boone's father. Nathaniel stood up. Sit down, boy. Grandmother. Sit down. He sat. Miss Hart, your father came into this house in 1791 to tell my husband that the survey was wrong and that part of my land had been quietly bled into a neighbor's parcel by a clerk's pen. Your father was an honest man. Your father wrote it up in black ink and signed it. And your father, girl, would not take money to forget it. Ma'am, they did not forgive him for that. They did not forgive him for 20 years. They waited. They waited until he had put every dollar he had into a speculation of his own, and then they moved against him. They called in his notes. They whispered in rooms he was not in. They turned his partners against him one by one. By the end, child, your father was not ruined by fortune. Your father was hunted to ground by men who had been waiting 20 years to bury the piece of paper you are holding in your hand. Eleanor could not breathe. Ma'am, I knew, girl. I knew what they were doing to him, and I did not speak. Put it in the ledger against me. I am old. I will answer for it where I am going. But you will have tonight what I should have given your father the week he brought that affidavit up these stairs. You will have the paper. You will have the ring. You will have the name of the child who was taken. And you will have, if you are brave enough to go fetch him, the only living man who can stand in a courthouse and say, my name is not what they told me. He is alive. He is a live child. He is a blacksmith in a town called Pine Hollow, 2 days' ride west of here. He is 52 years old this June. He has 3 daughters. He has a wife who knows him as Joseph Miller. And he has under his left collarbone a birthmark shaped like a crescent moon, which I kissed the day he was born, and have not kissed since." Nathaniel put his face in his hands. "Boy. Grandmother. Look at me." He looked. "You are not the heir of this house. You never were. Every brick you have slept under, every acre you have walked, every penny you have inherited. All of it belongs by the law of this state and the will of my first husband to a blacksmith named Joseph Miller, who does not know his own name. You can give it back to him, or you can do what every Ashford before you has done and keep it. I will not choose for you, Nathaniel. I am done choosing. I chose in 1794, and I have not slept a clean night since. Grandmother. Boy. I will give it back. Think, Nathaniel. I have thought, grandmother. I have thought in the 2 minutes since you opened that box more clearly than I have thought in the 29 years I have been alive. I will give it back." Margaret Ashford closed her eyes. A tear one ran the length of her cheek and did not reach her chin before her hand came up and took it. "Then I can sleep." She did not say anything else that night. They left her with the tin box open on her lap, and the teething ring closed in her hand, and they walked back down the east corridor in a silence that was not the silence of the house, but the silence of 2 people who had in the space of a quarter hour stopped being the people they had been at sundown. At the door of the music room, Nathaniel stopped. "Miss Hart." "Sir." "Your name?" "Eleanor, sir." "Eleanor." "Yes, Mr. Ashford. I have been calling you Miss Blake for 8 days. You have, sir. Forgive me. There is nothing to forgive. I asked you to Mr. Ashford." "Nathaniel." "Sir. My name is Nathaniel. I would be obliged if you would use it at least tonight, at least in this corridor, at least once before I lose the nerve to ask you for it." A long pause. "Nathaniel." "Thank you." That was the moment the barrier broke. Not a kiss, not a touch. A name spoken plain in a dark corridor by a woman who had not spoken her own name out loud in Virginia in 5 years. That was the moment. They did not have the night to keep it. 3 days later, the Ashford Harvest Gathering was held, as it had been held every August for 40 years under the oaks on the west lawn. Half the county came. The minister came. The militia captain came. The 2 judges came. The merchants came. Silas Boone came. Nathaniel had not wanted the gathering held. Mrs. Doggett had told him plain that if he canceled it in the year of his father's death, the county would whisper for a decade. So the gathering was held. Eleanor was introduced to the guests when she was introduced at all as Miss Blake of Baltimore, a professional woman retained for the restoration of the East Wing records. Silas Boone found her by the punch table at the edge of the oaks before the sun had gone down. "Miss Blake." "Mr. Boone, I believe we have not been properly introduced." "I believe, sir, we have not." "Silas Boone, of Boone's Landing, sometime magistrate, sometime creditor, full-time friend of this family, as I have been for 30 years. Sir." "Miss Blake, a word aside." "I am content here, Mr. Boone." "I am not, ma'am. Step with me." She stepped with him. Caleb Reed at the edge of the crowd did not take his eyes off her shoulder blades for a second. Boone walked her 20 paces away from the nearest guest. He stopped with his back to the oaks and his face to the river, so that no one could read his mouth from across the lawn. "Miss Hart." Her breath caught. "Sir?" "I do not play the fool girl, and I would take it kindly if you did not play me for one. I knew your father. I knew what your father knew. I have known since the morning that carriage pulled into Ashford's yard 8 days ago, precisely whose daughter stepped out of it. Mr. Boone?" "Hush, girl. It is my turn to speak, and you have 8 days of eavesdropping to make up for." She said nothing. "Your father, Miss Hart, was a stubborn man. Stubborn men in this country do not die of bad luck. Stubborn men in this country are killed by their own stubbornness, with the help of neighbors who have the patience to wait. Your father was killed by his own stubbornness. I had at most the patience. Mr. Boone, I am not finished. In the tin box upstairs, yes, girl. I know about the tin box. I have known about the tin box since 1794. I was 22 years old when my father paid for the stonecutter in the tin box upstairs. There is a piece of paper your father signed. That paper in a county courthouse is 30 years of men's lives. It is my father's estate. It is 2 judges' reputations. It is a militia captain's wife's dowry. It is the roof over the head of half the men pouring punch behind you. You understand me, Miss Hart. I understand you, Mr. Boone. Then understand the rest. If that paper walks into a courthouse, the paper will not make it to the bench. Something will happen to it on the road. Something will happen to whoever carries it. Something, Miss Hart, will happen to the young Ashford who was foolish enough to put his name on the carriage. And something in the whispering parlors of this county will happen to the unmarried professional woman from Baltimore who has been sleeping under his roof for 9 nights unchaperoned. You would not dare. Girl, I have dared worse, and you know it. You have known it since you were 11 years old, and watched your father go white at the breakfast table the morning he first understood who was coming for him. Her hand closed on the edge of the punch cup she had not realized she was still holding. What do you want, Mr. Boone? I want the paper, Miss Hart, tonight, in my hand. Before the fiddler starts, you will walk with me to my carriage. You will hand me the packet. You will take in exchange a note of credit for $2,000 on a Philadelphia bank drawn in the name Eleanor Hart, which will clear every debt your father left you and leave you at 30 years of age, a free woman with money of her own. And Nathaniel Ashford will keep his house, his name, and his neck. And if I refuse, then, child, I will walk back to that gathering behind you, and I will say one sentence in a voice loud enough to carry to the minister, which will end Nathaniel Ashford's standing in this county by breakfast tomorrow. And I will send word before midnight to a man in the Piedmont about a blacksmith named Joseph Miller. You understand me, Miss Hart. I know every piece of the board. You have not one piece I cannot take. Eleanor's hand shook. Once, she steadied it. Mr. Boone. Girl, you have mistaken me for my father. Have I? My father, sir, was an honest man. My father would have written the affidavit and carried it to the courthouse and died on the step before he handed it to you. My father did exactly that. And you called it bad luck and sat on your porch drinking brandy for 25 years. Miss Hart, I am not my father, Mr. Boone. I am the woman my father raised. I will not carry his paper to the courthouse. I will carry it to every courthouse in this state and every newspaper north of Richmond and every pulpit that will let me stand in it. You will not frighten me with my own reputation, sir. You already took my reputation. You took it in 1819, and I have been living without it for 5 years, and I am still standing here drinking your punch. There is nothing left for you to threaten me with. Boone's smile did not move. His eyes did. Child, there is always one more thing. What? Him. She followed his eyes. Nathaniel Ashford was 20 paces away on the edge of the lawn, speaking low with Caleb Reed. He had not seen them. He had not heard a word. If you will not trade the paper for your own name, Miss Hart, you will trade it for his. One word from me tonight before the fiddle strikes, and Nathaniel Ashford is a ruined man in the morning. One word. That was when the first shout came from the oaks. Men were running. A woman was screaming. Someone had struck someone else. Eleanor turned her head 1 inch and saw Caleb Reed going down under 2 men who had come up through the crowd from behind and laid hands on him without warning. Boone had brought men. Boone had brought men to the gathering. Nathaniel's voice carried across the lawn like a pistol shot. Take your hands off him. Then the evening broke apart. What happened next happened in under 90 seconds and was spoken of in that county for the next 40 years. Nathaniel Ashford crossed 20 paces of lawn in 5 strides. He did not draw. He did not need to. He took the first of Boone's men off his feet with a single blow that landed above the ear and dropped the man like a sack of oats. The second man turned and ran. Caleb Reed came up off the grass with blood in his mouth and a short-handled axe in his fist that he had not a minute before been holding. And Silas Boone, who had counted on a quiet extortion under the oaks, looked into the face of Nathaniel Ashford coming toward him across the lawn and understood 30 years too late that he had misjudged the grandson. Ashford. Boone. Now, son. Get off my land. Son, we have not. Get off my land, Mr. Boone, or I will not be responsible for the road you ride home on. Boone got on his horse. Boone rode. Half the county watched him go, and half the county knew by the set of his back that something had happened under the oaks that had not been supposed to happen. The minister drew his wife closer. The militia captain looked for the first time in 20 years at Nathaniel Ashford, as though he did not fully know who the man was. Nathaniel did not speak to the guests. He turned. He walked straight across the lawn to Eleanor Hart. He took her by the wrist, not hard, but not asking, and he walked her into the house past Mrs. Doggett in the front hall, up the stairs, and into the upstairs corridor, where the candles along the wall were already guttering in the draft of a storm coming up the river. Halfway down the corridor he stopped. He turned her. He planted one arm beside her head and caged her against the wall. Rain began to hit the shutters. Eleanor? Nathaniel. What did he say to you? Nathaniel. What did he say to you, Eleanor? He said he would destroy you. I heard that part from across the lawn. He said something else. Under his breath, at the punch table. I watched your hand. What did he say? He said I could save you. How? By giving him the paper. And by walking out of this house tonight. And by never seeing you again. His forehead came down against hers. Eleanor. Nathaniel. Say you never loved me. Say it now, and you will be on a northbound coach by sunrise, and he will have no hold on you, and I will burn every acre of this place to the ground before I let him touch one hair on your head. She did not speak. Eleanor. Say it. I will not. Say it, woman. I will not say a lie in this corridor, Nathaniel Ashford, for you, or for any man. I have given up too many true things in my life to add one more. Eleanor. I love you. God help us both, sir. I love you. And I will not be sent north to save a man who has finally at 29 years of age started telling the truth. He made a sound that was not quite a word. Then he kissed her. He kissed her in the upstairs corridor of Ashford House with the rain hammering the shutters and the candles shaking in the draft, and the whole county 20 paces and a lifetime below them on the lawn already beginning to whisper. He kissed her like a man who had been drowning for 30 years and had at last found the shore. And somewhere in the east wing, behind a door that had not opened in 3 years, an old woman with a tin box on her lap heard the rain start and closed her eyes and smiled for the first time since 1794. Morning came slow and gray over the river, and Eleanor Hart was already awake when it got there. She had not slept. She had sat in the music room by a guttering candle since 2 in the morning with the tin box open on the table and the affidavit in her lap, and she had done the arithmetic of the night, the way her father used to do the arithmetic of a survey, honestly and to the last inch. Caleb Reed found her there at 5:30. Ma'am? Caleb. Mr. Ashford is still asleep. First time in 4 nights, ma'am. He won't stir till 8. I know it. Ma'am? Caleb, I need a horse. He was quiet a long moment. You are leaving. I am leaving. Ma'am, don't. Caleb. Ma'am, that man up the stairs has not closed his eyes in peace since the April fire. Last night in that corridor was the first peace he has had, and you would walk out of this house before he opens them. Caleb, sit down. He sat. Caleb Reed, listen to me and listen plain. If I am in this house at noon tomorrow, Silas Boone will send word to Richmond. He will have a writ before the week is out. He will have 2 newspapers inside a fortnight. He will have Nathaniel Ashford's name ruined in every parlor from Norfolk to the Potomac by the first frost. And he will have every hand this family feeds, yours, Mrs. Doggett's, every laborer on this place, every tenant on the lower road thrown off the land when the estate falls. You understand me. Ma'am? If I am gone by sunrise, he has nothing. He has the shape of a scandal, nothing more. And a shape, Caleb, is not a hanging. Ma'am, he will come after you on the road. He will try. Alone. I will not be alone, Caleb. I will be carrying my father's name in a packet under my cloak, and my father's name has been waiting 30 years to walk into a federal records office in Philadelphia. I reckon it can carry me that far. Ma'am. Caleb. He will never forgive you. He will, Caleb. How do you know? Because the man who kissed me in that corridor last night was not a man who holds grudges. He was a man who had for the first time in his life stopped lying to himself. A man like that, Caleb does not hate the one who helped him tell the truth. He may be angry at her for a week. He may be angry at her for a month. But he will not hate her. Caleb said nothing. Caleb, the horse. The chestnut mare, ma'am. She is sound on the river road, and she will go all day on a handful of oats. I will have her saddled in the south paddock in a quarter hour. I will put her in my own name at the stable book, so no one in this house can say Mr. Ashford gave her. Thank you, Caleb. Ma'am. And the letter on this table, give it to him at 8. Not before, not after. At 8. Ma'am, I will. Caleb. Ma'am, if he rides after me. If he catches me on the road before I reach Alexandria. You tell him I said this. You tell him I will not come back to this house until his name is clean in a county courthouse. I will not come back as a scandal, Caleb. I will come back as a woman who can walk up the front steps with a minister watching, nothing less. Yes, ma'am. She was in the saddle by 6. She was 4 miles gone by 7. She was across the first ferry with a false name signed in a ferry keeper's book by 8, which was the hour when Caleb Reed walked up the stairs of Ashford House with a folded letter in his hand and knocked once on Nathaniel's door. Nathaniel opened the door in his shirt sleeves. Caleb. Sir. Where is she? The letter was in Caleb's hand. Nathaniel saw it. Nathaniel took it. Nathaniel read it, standing in the doorway, without inviting Caleb in. He read it twice. Then he sat down on the floor of the corridor. He did not fall. He sat. A tall man, fully grown, sat down on his own floor, in his own house at 8 in the morning, with his back against the door frame, and he did not speak for the better part of a minute. Caleb. Sir. When did she leave? 6 o'clock, sir. On what horse? The chestnut mare, sir. I put her in my name at the book. You. Yes, sir. She asked it, sir. You put a horse in your own name so that I could not lay the charge of theft at her feet if I chose to. Yes, sir. Caleb, you are a good man. Sir. Saddle the black. I will be down in 10 minutes. Sir, she said. I heard you. I read the letter. I am not riding after her. Caleb blinked. Sir, I am riding to the courthouse. Sir. Caleb, she left me a gift this morning, and it was not an easy one. She left me the chance to prove her right before she reaches Philadelphia. She has carried the paper north so that Boone will chase the paper. I am going to do what Boone does not expect. I am going to stand in my own county on my own ground with my grandmother's tin box in one hand and my father's inheritance ledger in the other, and I am going to call Silas Boone into open court for fraud. Today, this morning, before he learns she is gone. Sir, you cannot charge a man in open court at 9 o'clock of a Tuesday. I cannot, but I can swear a complaint. I can put it in writing. I can put it in the hands of 3 men in this county who have been afraid of Boone for 30 years, and who after last night will have the nerve to sign their names under mine. And once the complaint is sworn, Caleb, every paper in that tin box becomes evidence of a pending action. And evidence of a pending action even in Virginia cannot be burned by a man's friends on a country road. Sir, yes, sir. One more thing, Caleb. Sir, the blacksmith. Sir, Joseph Miller, in Pine Hollow. I need a man I trust to ride to Pine Hollow today and tell him carefully, Caleb gently, that a woman in Virginia believes she knows his true name, and that the land he was born to is waiting for him if he wants it, and that nobody will drag him from his forge against his will. I do not want him dragged. I want him told. I will ride, sir. No, not you. You I need at my shoulder. Caleb Doggett, sir, Mrs. Doggett's boy, 15 years old, light in the saddle, knows the Piedmont roads, and his mother raised him honest. Send him. Yes, sir. Caleb. Sir. If Miller comes back with you, if that man is willing, you bring him to the county courthouse. Not to this house, not to the lawn, to the courthouse, where he can be seen, by witnesses. Yes, sir. Go. By 9 o'clock, Caleb Reed was in the saddle. By 9:30, Caleb Doggett was on the road to the Piedmont with a flour sack of biscuits and a note in his mother's handwriting. By 10 o'clock, Nathaniel Ashford walked up the courthouse steps of his own county with a tin box under his arm and an inheritance ledger under the other, and he laid them both on the clerk's counter. And he said in a voice that carried through 3 open doors, "I am here to swear a complaint against Silas Boone, for fraud, against this estate fraud, against a minor child of this estate in the year 1794, and the ruin by willful conspiracy of one Samuel Hart, surveyor, between the years 1818 and 1820. The clerk dropped his pen. 2 rooms down, a judge who had been lacing his boots stood straight up. 3 days of thunder broke loose in the county of Ashford before sundown. Meanwhile, on the Alexandria Road, Eleanor Hart was learning what she already half knew, that a woman alone with a packet of papers under her cloak learns the true geography of the country by the end of the first day. She reached the first tavern at dusk. It was a plain crossroads place, a 2-story log house with a stable behind, and it had, like every tavern on a post road, a long common room where men drank and a narrow side room where respectable women sat. The landlord came out wiping his hands on an apron. "Ma'am?" "A room for the night, sir, and a stall for the mare." "Your husband, ma'am?" "I have no husband, sir. I travel on business." He looked at her. He looked at the mare. He looked at the dust on her cloak. "Ma'am, the side room is full. I can set you a cot in the kitchen by the fire if it suits." "It suits." "Name in the book, ma'am." She held her breath a half-second. "Eleanor Blake." The landlord wrote it down. The landlord looked up. "Blake." "Blake." "Ma'am, a gentleman came through here this morning asking about a woman of your description. Said her name was Hart." Her hand did not shake. She had trained it not to. "A gentleman. Red-faced fellow. Sat on a gray gelding. Said he was a creditor on the lady's late father's estate. Said if I saw such a lady I was to send word to a man in the next town." "Did you say you would?" "Ma'am, I did not. I do not much care for gentlemen who ride in before breakfast and leave coin on the counter for the sort of information a man ought not to sell." "Thank you, sir." "Ma'am, the cot's a rough one, but the kitchen door bars from the inside, and my wife sleeps 2 doors down with a loaded pistol on her bedside, and a temper on her that has been, I will admit to you, plain the subject of some regret in this household. You will sleep safe tonight." "I believe I will." The landlord's wife, a square-shouldered woman of 50 with gray at her temples, brought Eleanor a bowl of stew at the kitchen fire and sat down across the hearth without being asked. "Miss Blake?" "Ma'am?" "I do not know your true name, miss. I do not wish to." "Ma'am." "But I have lived 60 miles from this crossroads my whole life, and I have watched gentlemen on gray geldings ride in before breakfast 3 times in 30 years. The first time, it was after a woman whose husband had beat her half to death and she had run. The second time, it was after a woman who had run off with a traveling preacher more fool her. The third time was this morning. Ma'am, whatever you are carrying north, miss, you carry it north. You hear me?" "Yes, ma'am." "And if you reach Alexandria and find yourself wanting for a safe bed in Philadelphia, you go to Chestnut Street, to a boarding house, kept by a widow named Mrs. Harriet Coyle. You tell her Martha Penn at the crossroads sent you. She will take you in at any hour. You understand?" "Yes, ma'am. Thank you." "You are welcome, child." Martha Penn stood up. Martha Penn went to bed. Eleanor Hart slept 4 hours on a cot in a strange kitchen and rode out at first light with a cold biscuit in her pocket and her father's name a little nearer the courthouse than it had been. She was not followed on the second day, because on the second day, Silas Boone back in Ashford County was a man fighting for his own neck. By 10 o'clock that second morning, a sworn complaint had been entered against him in the county clerk's book. By noon, the minister from the harvest gathering, a man Boone had counted for 30 years as an ally, had walked into Nathaniel's library on his own 2 feet and said, "Mr. Ashford, I watched that man strike your hired hand on your lawn in front of my wife. I will sign whatever paper you put before me." By 3 o'clock, a second signature from the militia captain. By 5 o'clock, a third from the junior judge, who had for 15 years been quietly appalled by the senior judge's fondness for Silas Boone's table. And at sundown, a fourth signature arrived that Nathaniel had not asked for, and had not till that day believed was possible. Mrs. Doggett walked into the library with her apron still on. "Mr. Ashford." "Mrs. Doggett." "Sir, I have something I ought to have told your father 23 years ago." Caleb Reed looked up. "Mrs. Doggett, my husband, Sir Caleb's father. God rest him, worked on this place from '89 until his death. In the summer of 1794, he drove the wagon that carried the infant Josiah Ashford from this house to a Methodist family in Pine Hollow. He did not drive alone. There was a second man on the wagon, a hired man from Richmond, paid by your grandfather. That hired man, sir, was seen again in this county 8 years later, older and thinner, and he was seen again 10 years after that, at the side of Silas Boone. He worked in his last years as Mr. Boone's chief clerk. He died, sir, this past February of a wasting sickness, and he died in a small house on the lower road that is owned by me." "Mrs. Doggett." "Yes, sir." "Why?" "Because, sir, a man dying of a wasting sickness does not have many neighbors willing to take him in. And because, sir, before he died, he dictated to me, sir, with his own trembling mouth, in the hearing of my son, Caleb Doggett, and the Reverend Ames, who was sent for to hear the confession, a written statement of everything he had done and everything he had been paid to do and every name he had been paid to keep quiet." "Where is that statement, Mrs. Doggett?" "In my parlor, sir, sealed. I have been holding it since February, because I did not know, sir, to whom it ought to be given. Your father was dead. Your grandmother had not spoken in 3 years, and I did not know whether you, sir, would prove to be the boy I hoped you were, or the man your grandfather had been." "Mrs. Doggett?" "Sir." "What do you know now?" "I know, sir. I watched you cross that lawn last night." "Mrs. Doggett, I will fetch the paper, sir." She fetched the paper. The dying clerk's statement ran to 9 pages. It named in order a forged deed executed in 1794, a fraudulent baptismal record, a stolen survey transferred to Boone's father, and in its last 3 pages, the particulars of a systematic operation conducted between 1810 and 1820, in which Silas Boone, in concert with a Richmond lender and 2 county clerks in adjoining counties, had extended predatory loans to 7 families, called those loans in, at engineered moments of market distress, seized the collateral, and in each case altered the surveys after the fact, to enlarge the seized parcels at the expense of the neighboring owners. Samuel Hart's name was the 5th of the 7. Nathaniel read the statement through. He read it through a second time. He set it down. "Caleb." "Sir." "We are no longer defending this house." "Sir." "We are no longer defending my name." "Sir." "We are prosecuting Caleb, the longest-standing criminal enterprise in this corner of Virginia, and we are doing it in open court." "Yes, sir." "Saddle the black, and a second horse, and a third." "Sir." "You, me, and Reverend Ames, to the county seat tonight. We put the dying clerk's statement into the circuit judge's own hands before breakfast tomorrow. Boone will hear of it by 10. When he hears of it, Caleb, there is one road he will take, the post road north, toward Alexandria." Caleb went white under his tan. "Sir." "Yes, Caleb." "Miss Hart is on that road." "I know it, Caleb." "Sir, we have to ride." We are riding, Caleb, but we are riding with the paper in our hand, because the only thing that stops Silas Boone at a river crossing tomorrow is the fear, the honest, cold-working fear, that if he lays one finger on that woman, every man in 2 counties will know by Saturday that a circuit judge has his name on a writ. "Sir." "Ride." They rode. On the 3rd morning, on a stretch of post road 30 miles south of Alexandria, Eleanor Hart came down off a stony grade and found 3 men sitting horses in the road. She knew before they spoke. The lead rider tipped his hat. "Miss Hart." "Sir." "Step down off the mare, please, ma'am." "I will not, sir." "Miss Hart, Mr. Boone sends his compliments, and a request for the packet under your cloak." "Mr. Boone will be disappointed today, sir." "Miss Hart, we have ridden all night. We are not patient men." "Neither, sir, am I a patient woman, and neither, sir, is the rider behind you." The lead man's head turned. It turned slow, because a man who has done this work before does not turn his head fast for a stranger's trick. Then it turned faster, because the dust on the southern rise behind him was not a trick. It was 3 horses coming hard, Caleb Reed, Reverend Ames, and between them on the black Nathaniel Ashford. The lead rider did a quick calculation. 3 to 3, a minister among them, a woman who had as yet not dropped her reins, and the black gelding coming down the grade now at a gallop with a man on him who was carrying no gun and no axe, and did not need to. "Miss Hart." "Sir." "Today is not the day, ma'am." "No, sir, it is not." The 3 men turned their horses and were off the road and into the pines before Nathaniel came level with her. He did not speak. He swung down. He caught her by the shoulders. He looked at her the way a man looks at a house he has believed for 2 days was burning and finds instead still standing. "Eleanor." "Nathaniel." "Woman." "Sir." "You have had the worst 3 days of my life." "I know it." "You wrote me a letter." "I did." "I read it 9 times. "I am sorry, Nathaniel." "Do not be sorry, Eleanor. Do not ever be sorry for what you did. You were right. You were right 3 ways. And while you were on this road, I was in that courthouse, and I have under my coat this minute a paper that would put Silas Boone behind bars by Friday in a fair county and behind bars by Monday in this one. Nathaniel. There is more, Eleanor. I will tell you as we ride. We are not going to Philadelphia. Where are we going? To the county seat, Eleanor. To the courthouse. Tomorrow morning. You, me, Reverend Ames, Caleb, Mrs. Doggett. A dying man's 9-page confession. Your father's affidavit. And Eleanor, if Caleb Doggett has done his work. As I believe he has a blacksmith named Joseph Miller who rode south with him from Pine Hollow at dawn yesterday, and who has asked Eleanor only one thing of me before he will stand on a courthouse step beside us. What, Nathaniel? He has asked ma'am to meet the woman who gave him back his name. She could not speak. He lifted her back into the saddle of the chestnut mare with his own 2 hands. Ride with me, Eleanor. I will ride with you, Nathaniel Ashford, as far as the road goes. It goes, he said, to a courthouse square tomorrow at noon. And after that, ma'am, after that, for the first time in either of our lives, it goes wherever we choose. They turned their horses. They rode south. They rode south through the dusk and into the dark, and they did not stop until the lamps of the county seat showed yellow along the river. Reverend Ames rode at Eleanor's right knee the last 4 miles and did not speak above twice. He spoke once to tell her that a Methodist blacksmith named Joseph Miller had ridden into the county at sundown with Caleb Doggett at his elbow and was bedded down at that moment in the parsonage of the Baptist church, which had been chosen because no Ashford or Boone had sat in its pews in 40 years. He spoke a second time near the bridge to say this. Miss Hart, Reverend, I have buried in this county for 31 years. I have buried men that Silas Boone drove into the ground with his own 2 hands, and I have said over their graves words I did not fully believe because their widows were watching. I would not miss what will happen in that courthouse tomorrow, ma'am, for the deed to my own farm. Reverend, yes, child. You believe it will hold. I believe, Miss Hart, that when a man is finally named by 4 honest neighbors on the same morning, the county itself will hold him. I have seen it twice in my life. This will be the 3rd. They crossed the bridge. They did not go to an inn. Nathaniel had arranged a back room at the house of a Quaker couple who took in travelers without asking their business. And by 10 o'clock, Eleanor was sitting at a kitchen table with a cup of tea going cold in front of her, and Caleb Reed standing by the door, and Nathaniel across from her reading for the third time that day the dying clerk's 9-page confession. Eleanor. Nathaniel. There is one thing I have not told you. Nathaniel, I have learned in this household that sentence is the hinge of every door. He almost smiled. Joseph Miller. Yes. He does not want the land. Her cup stopped halfway to her mouth. Nathaniel. He does not want the land, Eleanor. Caleb Doggett rode 2 days for him. The Reverend Ames sat with him 4 hours in the parsonage. The man is 52 years old. He has 3 daughters. He has a wife of 29 years. He has a forge he built with his own hands. He has a small congregation in Pine Hollow that reads his name plain in the church book every Sunday. He says, a life. Nathaniel. He will stand in the courthouse tomorrow, Eleanor. He will say his true name out loud in the hearing of a circuit judge for the sake of my grandmother and the sake of your father. But he will not take the land. He will not leave his forge. He will not move his daughters into a house his mother was not allowed to speak his name in. Then Nathaniel. Then Eleanor, the Ashford estate by the will of my great-grandfather Thomas, goes to the next lawful heir of my grandmother's body, which upon Joseph Miller's refusal, and under the terms of that, will I have read it tonight, Eleanor, with Reverend Ames at my shoulder, falls to my father's line. To you. Not to me, Eleanor. To me in trust. Nathaniel. What do you mean? I mean, ma'am, that I will not take 1 acre of this estate as an inheritance. I will hold it in trust under terms Joseph Miller himself dictated to me not 2 hours ago in the parsonage. Every laborer, every tenant, every dependent family on this place keeps their roof. Every hand that has put its labor into Ashford land for 30 years is to be paid in coin or in deeded acreage a share of what that labor built. Every seized acre Silas Boone stripped off a neighbor between 1810 and 1820. Every acre Eleanor, all 7 families, is to be surveyed back to the original line and returned to the families that lost it with interest paid out of the Ashford household accounts. Nathaniel. Including Eleanor, the 320 acres your father's partners lost in 1819. She set the cup down very carefully. Nathaniel Ashford. Eleanor Hart. You would impoverish yourself. I would not, ma'am. I would relieve myself. There is a difference. Nathaniel. Eleanor, listen to me. I have been carrying for 29 years a house that was built on the erased name of my grandmother's firstborn son and on the stolen acres of 7 families in this county. I did not know it. That does not change what the house was built on. I will not carry it 1 day further. Joseph Miller has given me leave in writing to turn this estate into the repair of what was done. I will do that. I will be a poorer man by a great deal. I will be, Eleanor, for the first time in my life, a man who can walk into a room and put his hand out without wondering what the hand is worth in acres. She could not speak for a long moment. Nathaniel. Eleanor. I have not in my life heard a man of your class speak such a sentence out loud. Perhaps, ma'am, you have not been listening to the right class. Perhaps, sir, there has not been one to listen to. He reached across the table. His hand was steady. His fingers closed over hers. Eleanor. Nathaniel. Stand with me tomorrow. I will stand with you, sir, tomorrow, and every day after until one of us is put in the ground and the other one follows. That is a long promise, ma'am. I am a long-memoried woman, sir. At 11:30 the next morning, the courthouse square of the county seat held more people than it had held since the muster of 1814. Word had traveled the way word travels in country counties faster than any horse by a route no map shows. By 8 o'clock, farmers were coming in off the lower road. By 9, the merchants had closed their shutters. By 10, the militia captain had posted 6 men plainclothed and unarmed around the edges of the square, not to keep order, but to see it kept. By 11, the circuit judge who had ridden up overnight from Richmond was in chambers with the county clerk, the sworn complaint, and the 9-page confession of a dying man on the desk between them. At the top of the courthouse steps, Nathaniel Ashford stood with his grandmother's tin box under his arm. At his right stood Eleanor Hart, in a plain travel dress, with the affidavit her father had signed in 1791, folded in her hand. At his left stood Reverend Ames Caleb Reed, Mrs. Doggett, and a broad-shouldered man in a leather apron, who had not been seen in that county in 52 years, and whose name on the church book of Pine Hollow was Joseph Miller. At the foot of the steps in the crowd, Silas Boone sat his gray gelding and did not dismount. He had come because his lawyer had told him he must. He had come because a warrant for his appearance had been issued at dawn, and 2 militiamen had ridden to Boone's Landing to deliver it by hand. He had come because a man like Silas Boone, when he sees the road closing, rides straight down it on the chance the gate is weaker than it looks. He was about to learn the gate was not weaker than it looked. The circuit judge came out onto the top step. The crowd went quiet the way a summer field goes quiet before a storm breaks. "Mr. Ashford." "Your Honor." "You have a statement to make before this court." "I do, sir." "Make it." Nathaniel Ashford turned. He did not turn to the judge. He turned to the square because what he was about to say was not for one man's ear. It was for 300. "Neighbors." The square held its breath. "My name is Nathaniel Ashford. I was born in this county. My father was born in this county. My grandfather is buried in this county. And I have come here this morning before His Honor, before Reverend Ames, before every man and woman in this square, to tell you that my family name for the last 30 years has been carried on a lie." A sound went through the crowd. Not a word. A sound. "In the year 1794, in the house my father raised me and my grandmother's firstborn son was taken from his cradle at 4 months old and given to a Methodist family in the Piedmont. A false entry of death was written into our family book. A false grave was marked. A false survey was then used to move 320 acres of my grandmother's land she had held by right of her first marriage into the parcel of a neighbor. That neighbor, sir, was the father of Silas Boone." The sound in the crowd was louder now. "That firstborn son did not die in 1794. He is standing on these steps this morning." He stepped aside. Joseph Miller, 52 years old, a blacksmith in a leather apron, a man who had not walked onto Ashford ground in 5 decades, stepped forward and took off his hat. Margaret Ashford, who had been carried to the square in a hired chaise that morning, and who had not spoken in public since 1821, looked up from the chaise at the foot of the courthouse steps into the face of her firstborn son for the first time in 52 years, and she did not weep, and she did not cry out, and she did not faint. She said in a voice that carried all the way up the steps, "Josiah, come down here and let your mother see your face." He came down. He knelt by the chaise. He took her hand in both of his. He did not speak. She did not need him to. The crowd made no sound at all. Nathaniel went on, "Your Honor." "Neighbors." The land fraud of 1794 is only the beginning of what I have come here to say. Between the years 1810 and 1820, a confederacy of 3 men in this county and 2 in adjoining counties engineered the ruin by predatory loan and altered survey of 7 families known to every man in this square. I will read their names, sir, and I will read them plain. He read the names. The 5th name he read was Samuel Hart. Eleanor Hart's hand closed on the affidavit. She did not cry. She had cried every tear for her father in the 5 years before this morning. This morning she only stood with her shoulders square and her chin up as her father's name was read in the open air of a Virginia courthouse for the first time without a man's sneer attached to it. The particulars of these 7 frauds, Nathaniel said, are set out in a sworn confession of 9 pages dictated in February of this year by a dying clerk in the presence of my housekeeper, Mrs. Doggett, her son Caleb Doggett, and Reverend Ames. The confession is in His Honor's hands this morning. The confession names as the principal author of every one of these frauds Silas Boone of Boone's Landing. Silas Boone did not move in his saddle. I further declare before this court and this county that the Ashford estate has this day been placed in trust under my hand with the written consent of Joseph Miller for the purpose of restoring acre for acre every piece of land improperly taken from any family in this county between the years 1810 and 1820, and for the equitable compensation of every laborer, tenant, and dependent family on the Ashford land, whose work has built the estate these 30 years past. I will take no portion of the estate in my own name. I will receive as trustee only such allowance as Reverend Ames and 2 others of this county shall from time to time deem proper." The crowd made a sound then that was not quiet. "I have one final thing to say." The square hushed. "I ask no reward from this county for what I have said here this morning. I did not earn it. My grandmother did not earn it, though she carried the weight of it for 30 years. The woman who earned it is the woman standing at my right shoulder, whose father signed an honest affidavit in this county in 1791 and was hunted to ground for it across 25 years. Her name is not Blake. Her name is Eleanor Hart. She is the only child of Samuel Hart, surveyor of this county, and she is the reason any of this is known." He turned. He took Eleanor's hand. "Miss Hart, Mr. Ashford, in the hearing of this court, in the hearing of this county, in the hearing of the woman who bore my father and the man who ought to have inherited my house, I ask you to be my wife, not quietly, not under a settlement, not under a cloud, here, now, in the open." The square did not breathe. Eleanor Hart looked at Nathaniel Ashford. Then she looked past him down the steps, past the chaise, past the waiting judge, into the crowd, to the back to the rail where a man on a gray gelding was still sitting his horse and watching her. She looked Silas Boone full in the eye. Then she turned back to Nathaniel. "Mr. Ashford, Miss Hart, I will." The crowd roared. Silas Boone turned his horse. Silas Boone started for the edge of the square. 2 militiamen stepped into the road in front of him. "Mr. Boone, step aside." "No, sir, His Honor's warrant, sir. You will dismount." He did not dismount at once. He looked across the heads of the militiamen and the crowd up the courthouse steps, past the judge, past the minister, past Mrs. Doggett, past Caleb Reed, past Joseph Miller kneeling by his mother's chaise, and he found the face he was looking for. "Miss Hart." Eleanor did not flinch. "Mr. Boone, you think this is the end of it?" "I do, sir." "You are a green girl and a fool." "Mr. Boone." "Yes. I am 30 years old. I am not green. I have not been a fool since the morning I watched my father go white at a breakfast table. The end of it, sir, is the 9 pages in His Honor's hand. The rest is paperwork. And paperwork, Mr. Boone, I know." He stared at her a beat. Then he laughed once short, and without any humor in it at all, and he swung down off the gray gelding, and he let the militiaman take his elbow, because there was nothing else a man in his position could do with the county watching. The circuit judge's gavel came down. "This court will convene in 1 hour to hear sworn evidence on the matter of Silas Boone and the 7 frauds of 1810 to 1820. Mr. Boone, you are remanded to the custody of the militia. Mr. Ashford, you have leave to proceed with the trust you have declared. Miss Hart. Miss Hart, ma'am, if you will accept the informal sentiment of this bench, this court congratulates you on your betrothal and upon the restoration of your father's name." He brought the gavel down a second time. "We are adjourned until noon." The square did not adjourn. The square stayed. Farmers came up the steps and shook Nathaniel's hand. Merchants came up and tipped their hats to Eleanor. A woman Eleanor had never seen before, the widow of one of the 7 ruined men, came up and kissed Eleanor's knuckles and said, "Child, your father was kind to mine," and went away without giving her name because she did not need to. Reverend Ames blessed Joseph Miller, and Joseph Miller blessed his mother and Margaret Ashford, 79 years old, in a hired chaise in the sun. Closed her eyes for the first time in 30 years, like a woman who had put down a weight she had been told she must carry to her grave. The trial of Silas Boone lasted 11 days. The verdict was read on a Saturday morning in the same courthouse before a larger crowd than had stood there on the day of the betrothal. Silas Boone was found guilty on all 7 counts of fraud on the forged baptismal record of 1794, on the altered survey of 1794, and on the willful conspiracy to ruin Samuel Hart between the years 1818 and 1820. He was sentenced to the full penalty the statutes of Virginia allowed in that year, which was not hanging because fraud is not hanging, but which was the stripping of his estate, the forfeiture of every parcel he had touched, and a term of confinement which he did not, as it happened, outlive. The 7 families got their land back, every acre, every inch. The Ashford household account paid the interest. Reverend Ames signed the deeds. Caleb Reed witnessed them. Joseph Miller went home to Pine Hollow on the 10th day with his mother's teething ring in a pouch at his throat and a letter in his saddlebag giving him lawful claim under his mother's seal, and Nathaniel Ashford's notarized signature to a tract of 40 acres adjoining his forge, which had been purchased with Ashford coin at his own request so that his daughters might one day have land in their own name without their father ever having to leave his. He sent at Christmas a pair of iron fire dogs he had forged himself for the hearth of Ashford House. Nathaniel set them in the east parlor. They stood there for the rest of his life. Margaret Ashford lived 2 years more. She lived long enough to see Eleanor Hart married to her grandson in the Baptist church of the county seat in a plain dress before 200 witnesses with Mrs. Doggett at her shoulder and Caleb Reed standing up for the groom. She lived long enough to see the east wing of Ashford House rebuilt and to see her firstborn son's name, Josiah Thomas Ashford, born September 1792. Living entered by Eleanor's own hand in the family register on a fresh page in clear ink, with no second hand, no third hand, and no lie. She lived long enough to hold for 1/4 of an hour on a Sunday afternoon in the spring of her last year, the first Ashford child of the new line, a daughter whose name was not kept from the family book for any reason at all. The daughter's name was Martha Penn Ashford, for the landlady of a crossroads tavern who had told a frightened woman on a dark night, "You carry it north." Years later, long after Margaret was buried beside her first husband in the family plot under her own true name, and not the one she had been married into, there hung in the front hall of Ashford House 2 framed pieces. One was the portrait Eleanor had restored. The overpaint was gone. The small figure of a 4-month-old child had been uncovered, cleaned, and set right in his mother's lap where he had always been. The other was not a portrait. The other was a framed land survey, copied in Eleanor Hart's own hand, from her father's original of 1791, with every true boundary drawn in black ink, every erased name restored in red, and every family's acreage marked to the foot as it had stood before the first lie was told. Visitors to the house in later years sometimes asked Eleanor which of the 2 pieces she was proudest of. Eleanor Hart Ashford, who lived to be 81 years old in that house, and who was buried by her own written request in a plain pine coffin beside her husband under a stone that read only her name. Her dates and the words, "A honest hand," always gave the same answer. "Neither, sir. I am proud of the woman who hung them." And that is the end of it. The house still stands. The land is still held. The names in the book are still true. And in a country where the powerful had for a long time painted over what they did not want to be remembered, one woman in a plain travel dress with her father's notebook in her satchel and a packet of papers under her cloak walked into a Virginia courthouse on a Tuesday morning in the summer of 1820 and proved once and for all that the truth does not belong to the men who bury it. The truth belongs to the hands brave enough to dig it up. Eleanor Hart was one of those hands, and that is why her name is still spoken in that county to this day.